where are we headed now?
We're going to Texas. We're on our way there now. This will be the third time in the past like 6 months we're headed to Texas.
No, this one's Dave Tillema, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit different because we are doing already flying airplane. A lot of times we do the fuselage, you know, and we go ahead and get the engine installed.
Well, he was always kind of looking for a Viking, but then he ended up getting involved with Azalea Aviation and ended up with one of the Corvair engines, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What kind of time does he have on that one?
I had about 90-something hours on it, and then unfortunately broke a crank in it.
Well, we're going to do the 90 now, but what I was thinking about is, so that's Dave Tillema, we're going to go and see him, but isn't there yet another Texas install coming up? Friends of the first people we met? Or?
Oh yeah, oddly enough, when a lot of you have seen the installation that we've done with Alan, and there's a gentleman out there that just bought his kit as well, and William, hi, but we'll be going out there hopefully eventually soon. There's a huge flying community, like I've said many times before, in Texas, so I have a feeling we'll be back time and time again, but it's fun.
Well, this one's kind of unique though, because we haven't really done an engine swap on an already flying airplane. Well, we have at our shop. We've done a lot of 4 or 5 Corvairs, mostly because they wanted more power, and we've done
some
Jabiroos because they wanted more power. But
it's a similar story both ways around.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this is the first time that we're going to be traveling to do a swap. So we've allotted for a little more time. We have 5 days that we're going to be there just to make sure, because we're going to be flying the actual airplane before we leave. So it's not just going to be run up on the ground. We're actually going to go fly.
Well, it was a flying airplane until recently. So mostly what we'll be doing was make sure the electrical system and the fuel system is kind of geared towards our engine or the 130 engine.
We just want to make sure everything is safe before, obviously, we go flying and set up for our engine. That's all.
So we should get some nice videos. I think about the only thing we're not going to mount now, since it's back ordered, is a spinner, but we should get some nice flying videos of the airplane. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Making him wear my backpack and his little foo-foo dog. Little foo-foo dog. Finally at the airport, and we're gonna get situated. No, we're waiting at the airport, and so is Rudder. Hanging out until we board. Just landed in Texas. Rudder did okay. How'd you do, Rudder?
Ladies and gentlemen, I have been raining here in Houston.
We're making out all right. Door too. Jan, does it also close?
Yeah. I like the bigger ones too, because you don't have the cabinets slamming on you all the time.
It's the small things in life, right? I can't believe you're amazed at this.
Well, it's kitchen stuff.
Yeah. Watch your face, Dave.
All right.
That'll do it.
Now we gotta get on the inside. All right, so we got the bottom nut in on this, which is that MS nut to have more room, and then up above we use a regular AN6 nut, and that's all tightened, and we put some washers to get a right amount of clearance for the threads. And we'll move now on to work on the top mount, which is going to have 2/4 inch bolts. So let's do that next. All right, now we got to rehook it.
Helping better. So we've got the mount all bolted in. Yeah, I got it right over here. Just kidding, I have it back on the table. All right. Engine mounting hardware.
You can undo the hoist. And now, bring that back, and then we got 2 days work.
They've started in on the heater installation. When they're done with that, I'll give you a closer up look. We've done them before. But every installation is always a little bit different, especially in this case where we're trying to make some things that were already installed work with minimal changes. So I'll show you that here in a minute. So overall, you can see both of the lines. Now, again, overlook here. Behind the gearbox. And over here. So we've taken off the old kind of heat muff since we installed a different heater here. We reused that pass-through to get the ECU connections through. We went ahead and put the air filter on up here, which just requires a little bit of trimming of that 90-degree elbow. And then that's all set. We've taken this off to get the sensor in here from MGL. It's a little easier to take it off, and then we'll just put this back on later. We put oil in the engine, and we put gear oil. An update. We've got the throttle installed here. All the way in. So it's installed. You'll follow it through the firewall here.
Whoa, Clark, look at this.
And
Come on, Blake.
that's it. It's as simple as that. And then the gearbox vent, which you don't fill the gearbox here. You fill it through this plug here. And then you obviously have the sight glass over here that shows, and then your drain underneath. But this is, some people confuse this with something you fill. You do not fill this. You really shouldn't be seeing any kind of gearbox oil in it at all. It's just simply a vent. Now your coolant, we use the Evans waterless coolant, but that goes in here. And you want that lower than your little 5-pound pressure cap you got going on here, and we fill through here. It's very concise work. Doing some bending on the go. Wait, there's more.
Almost a 90.
Almost a 90, but not quite.
Not quite a 90. A little more.
It's all done. Not close. I'm hungry. I know you're hungry. You're over here bending aluminum. Feed me.
You don't need
What? Do what?
My hand a little bit.
Long face. Why? Come on. What are you doing? What are you doing? Come on, more detail. More detail. What are you cutting?
Making a battery cable.
Wiring.
No.
Still got some things to do here, but wiring is delicate and tedious, and but soon we'll be done. I say we, I mean him.
Alright, you guys are looking at the workmanship of Dave Tillema. Beautifully built CruZer. And what we did today was we installed a fuel system for the Viking 130. And you guys have seen videos on that before, very similar. But it's always good to look at as many videos as possible during your installation. Here's the hose coming from his pilot side tank. This airplane already had a different engine, so we only had a vent line accessible in the co-pilot side. So you see a vent line and a feed line coming from that. The vent line then just goes to the top of the tank, and the same with the feed line. One difference here is we have quick disconnect filters prior to the header tank, which now is mandatory on all of them. The filter that's built into the fuel pump in the tank it's kind of small, and we really don't want to get any dirt in that, because it's a lot easier to undo these snap on filters, quick disconnect filters, than it is to take the pump out. And of course the filters are much cheaper as well than replacing the pumps. So those all just feed the header tank. As you can see, there's our fuel transducer, so we can read the fuel on the gauge. And we also have a return here from an orifice, which is shown as in the past on our fuel diagram. And that's in order to be able to relieve pressure through a 10,000ths orifice, which is right there. And that's just so that when the airplane's parked, if any pressure bleeds back from the direct injection system into the rubber hoses, it has some place to go. And other than that, we've got the, let me get my camera down here, outlet of the pumps right here at the bottom of the tank. And those two then go into the splitter device here. There's a check valve here and a one there, so we don't get any feedback. Even though the pumps have them already built in, we add additional ones just for extra safety. And there's the bleed we talked about, and then the exit from the splitter. Normally we would have had the fuel transducer here as well, but there were so many wires on the MGL fuel transducer in this airplane that we decided, instead of running all those wires all the way back here, we put the transducer on the firewall. And then we have yet another filter, high pressure filter. It's identical to the other ones we tested, and it doesn't have to be different. And then from there, the fuel hose then runs forward, and it goes over the landing gear and down underneath the airplane. We've shown some videos of that in the past. The tank itself is mounted. We removed this stringer and we added a lightweight square tube right there with 2 slots in it for these clamps to run through. This one and this one. And then we added the brace up here so the tank cannot rotate. Here you can see the amount of washers we used on those. Even those very, very short AN3 screws, we still added washer because we measured the depth of the hole in the tank that had been machined and tapped, and obviously we didn't want to push through that and make a hole in the tank. Another thing you can see here is the drain right there. It's the standpipe. So basically you need a nipple. It needs to be the right length depending on how, where you mounted the tank, the distance up that you mounted the tank on the square tube. And then once you get that done, they make these nipples in like pretty much every ½ inch. So you would screw that up in there, and then there's a union, and then on the belly is the drain itself with a slightly oversized hole in order for it not to hit the airplane with some movement. And that's the amount of work that went on back here, other than of course just wiring the pumps and running those wires, marking them and running them up front for the fuel pumps and also for the transducer. So we had 6 wires, 2 for the transducers and 2 for each fuel pump. All right, we're going to close this up and take a little bit more video and then go flying.
Coming soon. All right, he's getting ready. Hard to see. And he's up already. Your in number, Dave.
I know. Don't go any higher.
so pretty. Is he dancing with it?
Dave's trimming the cowling with a special tool that doesn't make so much dust. Like a half circle diamond blade. We're trying to follow the contours of the plane, but we also, as I said before, we don't want the cowling way back here because it's a different shape than where the cowling leaves. So once it's set properly up front, we want to trim the cowling as close to this line as possible. Right now. All right, so we just started on the bottom. As you can see, we finally got the cowling up against the hinges by trimming it as short as possible and using 3 loop sections of hinge, and we're going to work our way up like that. All right, so we pulled the muffler off. We had it on just temporarily, and we've done a little bit of measuring. Actually, before we took it off, we had the cowling off, and we were able to measure the distance from the oil pan out and also from the firewall forward. And we got some measurements, and we also got the angle between this flange and that by just grabbing a piece of metal. We had a piece of leftover hinge here, and this ball lined up with this whole type of thing. So we just set that like that, pushed that down flush, had it all clamped, and that made this parallel with the exhaust pipe, and we're able to mark it there as well. So we had just a few little things we did to try to get the hole in the right place. All right, so we got one step further. The bottom cowling is done, and it turned out good. Obviously there's a little bit of sanding and getting it ready for paint and everything. This is kind of optional here. Just put a little bit of filler in here to make it fit this corner if you want that to blend perfectly. And then the other side too turned out good. Just not painted. Of course, there was another cowling on here, so we kind of was retrofitting this. The exhaust opening is turned out okay. We're going to take off just a little bit more on the back side here, just so that it's not so close that it could burn the fiberglass. And then we put a little bit of padding on top of the fuel pump in here, a little bit on some electrical connector there, so that we could set a gap. You can see our padding up in here, and get some clearance to our engine. And then we put the top cowling on, evened it left and right, and without distorting it, we very carefully pushed the cowlings together and drilled tiny little holes just to hold it together. Of course, we're not worried about little holes in the cowling that we're not going to use at the end because it's all fiberglass. So you just countersunk from the inside, and put a little bit of filler in there, a little Bondo, before paint. And so we're getting there. All right, so since we retrofitted this already had braided fuel lines coming through. So what we ended up doing is we undid the braided fuel line basically, and we used the guts of it in order to get a fuel injection hose clamp onto the same fitting, and that worked out fine. And then we just run them through grommets in the back wall, through the upright here, and then through the back wall. And the other side we just did one because he only had a vent line on one side. That's the same thing. We reused the fitted hose and pushed that into the fuel injection hose and clamped it. So that was pretty simple in order to get a vent for the header tank and 2 feed lines down to the back. So we got that all done. Now, that was all we did for the fuel inside the airplane. And we did run underneath, as we show in our other videos, we did run this pass-through, and we ran up above the radiator. We also put its cube underneath here, and that's for fuel flows. All right, so this is basically inside of Dave's airplane. He had this EXP bus panel, which it's okay. Just don't like it, you know, as far as running the engine stuff through it. And so we brought with us a Viking wired panel, and we replaced the top of his console with one that we brought that's all pre-wired. And we have the dual battery switches and the fuel pumps and the alternator in there. And of course the key only cranks it, and we put our fuel gauge there that reads the header tank. So that was all pre-wired from us. We brought that with us, and that's something that we can actually sell directly to a customer if somebody wants to do that. And then of course the back of it, see if I can catch it. You can see it there. Of course some of this is all existing wiring, but the part that we brought was the back of that, or that console with the pre-wired switches. The last switch, we turned it into, because it wasn't used for anything, wasn't for a Viking view, so we put a 5-amp breaker there and the heater switch that gave us control over the heater. We did install a heater, and in this airplane it was put up in a little bit of an angle, and we kind of like that because once we made the first flight, it was blowing air kind of across the cabin, so both occupants would get an equal amount of heat. All right, so that's that. Now we're going to take a little break, and we'll talk about the wiring of the rest of this stuff here on the firewall. All right, so we got Dave's laser out, and we just put a line across the cowling, and then we took a tiny little drill bit and drilled through both cowlings to transfer the line to the inside cowling. Now we're going to cut the cowling.
Cowling work. It's not easy. Good job.
All right, so this was all done on the firewall. So basically what we've got is 2 pass-throughs down here for ground and for positive. The batteries were already here in nice little cases, which Viking gonna start carrying for our batteries. And then the contactors were put in. The bus bars, those you wanna make sure that you tighten the screws before you start working on it. Make sure that when you receive them that they're tight from the start. These main bolts that I'm putting in focus, because that kind of gives you the main connection to the bus bar. Of course there's a nut on top of all your connectors, but these are only supposed to be used for the engine. If you're gonna run from here to the rest of the airplane, you would run a wire off of here and you'd run it to a fused connection. Like this airplane uses 10 amps outside of the engine. So everything then comes off of that. And then if that's not enough, then you can go to a 15 amp, but as low as possible, because you don't want something in the airplane to take out the engine. So all these connections you see on the grounding bus there, those are all for the engine. They're fuel pumps, sender units, all that kind of stuff. Only none of them are used to actually run the engine as far as the grounds, because the computer and everything is grounded directly to the engine. On the positive side, you see there's not a lot of connections. There's just a bus bar there to be able to bring main power to it for the starter and everything. And then there's a couple of wires coming off of it, and it's for powering the computer. And then if, like I said, if you wanted to go over to another bus bar for your airplane. This one has an MGL system, so it's a little bit of a strange, or different for me anyhow. Pressure transducer for the fuel right here. So that's how it was done. As you can see, we didn't use a shelf in this installation behind the panel. It was basically already done deal, the panel, so we just mounted everything to the firewall.
Rainy, sprinkling out right now, but Jan and Dave are gonna take the first flight in his 750 with the new engine, so I'm gonna get some video of that for you guys. It's pretty far off, so let's see.
Turned out nice. Just needs a spinner and some paint work on the cowling. Alyssa was out there looking at us, watching us.
That's a wrap. We're headed to the airport, going home. Dave has an airplane, flying one. That's it. Back to Florida. We'll see you soon, Texas. Rudder. Where's Dave? Where's Uncle Dave? Oh no. You have to leave Uncle Dave behind.
Yeah, how are you going to survive?
He stays in Texas.
Yeah, he has to. Rudder and Dave really got along, didn't they? Where's Uncle Dave? He's coming. Uh-oh, there he is.
Where's Uncle Dave?
Where's my little rudder?
That's funny. Oh man. Oh man.
There's baby. There's my baby. Oh, look at you.